I'm Rob Downey, a family practice MD and Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. I'm coming to you from Seaworthy Functional Medicine in Homer, Alaska. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. How can we take next steps to support and become gardeners as part of our personal health journey and as part of the Regenerative project to love, sustain, and protect the planet? Today, we could not be more fortunate than to be joined by Matthieu Mehuys, which translates from Dutch to my house. Matthieu, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, Rob, thank you very much for having me on this show. I'm super excited to dive deep on health, gardening, and all these related topics on your amazing show.
Thanks. So to set the stage here today, you are a landscape architect, you're a passionate gardener, and you're one of those wonderful individuals where what you do is based on what you've loved and been fascinated by since you were a child.
Yes.
And you grew up in farming and have family that still do that. And so to sort of work the problem in reverse, so our audience, who I thank for joining us, knows where we're going today, you've just published a book, you've got an online program that helps people start gardens or further their garden. You're part of a documentary. So when we get to the end of today's podcast, I'll make sure and have you share where people can find you. But let's, I always actually find one of the most powerful things to do is the majority of folks in functional medicine are like comic book heroes. They have a genesis story. They have an origin story where their superpowers come from. And I know for you, it's some of my review of your work thus far, some of it has to do with just your love and interest in the natural world. But let's frame your genesis story, not just around your heart, connecting to that, but then what is it that's, how did you get to this point of wanting to, have this be your work to say, hey, everybody, we can get this right personally in a way that supports ourselves and our communities and the planet. How did you get to the action step?
Yeah, well, Rob, I love that question. I love the genesis analysis. So to answer that question, I'll give you my backstory. So like you just said, I grew up on a family farm. My father is a farmer, still an active farmer today, and my brother is also part of the farming business. I'm also helping them to make the regenerative transition. We've done some amazing work, but it all actually started for me when I was around the age of 3 years old. It must have been like one of my earliest memories that I had, like conscious memories of coming onto this planet, was that I was so extremely fascinated about the fact that if you have a tiny little seed and it's like just there, it looks like a piece of dirt, and then you put it in contact with the soil and you wait and you look after it, it can turn into a magnificent plant. It germinates, and I was so fascinated about it. Like, how on earth is it possible? A small seed can turn into a beautiful crop, or in some cases, in a huge oak tree, for example, oak trees that are 1,000 years old, they all came from one tiny seed. How is that? How on earth is that possible? So these were like, can you imagine a 3-year-old starting with those questions? And it all started because I grew up on the farm, and with my dad, he's been farming. So we would go out on the fields in early spring, like a field that was completely empty. We would go to the middle of the field and start scratching the surface to see if the crops were growing. And I still remember he explained to me, look, the seeds are germinating. It's good. We're on for the season. Like, that was always an important moment to see that germination starting, because it's the start of the new life. And then around the age of 5 years old, because my father is a cash crop farmer and we have cattle, so we didn't really have much vegetables on the farm. And when I was 5 years old, I had an amazing teacher at school who was teaching us everything about growing your own food and all this stuff about plants and even making saplings and cutlings and all this stuff. So I'm blessed, and I think every school should have that. So I came back home from school around the age of 5 and said to my parents, over dinner table, Mom and Dad, I'm gonna start my own garden. I need a piece of the garden so I can grow my own food. So they were like, no, we don't have time. They're like farmers, right? Busy, like super busy.
Cobblers
My
without
mom,
shoes.
yeah, exactly. And so they didn't have like time. They said like, no, we can't do that. Eventually, I kept asking, and they said, okay, go and we'll give you a couple square meters in the back of the garden. And I started out with radishes for some odd reason. I don't remember why. And for everybody's listening, wanting to start their gardening journey and grow their own food, start out with radishes. It's the easiest crop ever to grow. But then what happened was I had early success. Like you just put some radish seeds into the soil. You can harvest them a couple weeks later. They're delicious. And I was like, wow, this gardening is quite easy. So I went out and continued, bought more seeds. Well, my father bought them for me. And I thought like this gardening is so easy. I'm going to just spread, like prepare my soil, add a little bit of compost. And I started spreading out all of my seeds all over my garden, thinking like, I'm just going to come back in a couple of weeks. It's going to be full of lush, fresh vegetables and tomatoes and carrots. And I think, Rob, you also already see what's coming next. So I came back from a holiday at my cousin's or something, maybe summer camp, thinking like, oh, going back to my garden, seeing all my plants growing. But I came back to a garden that was overgrown by weeds higher than I was. And I was devastated. I was like, why is nature not giving me the things that I want to eat? Why do I have all these weeds in my garden? And ever since that moment in my life, I and obviously you can only connect the dots looking backwards, but I dedicated my life to understanding how nature works and how what we learn from nature, how can we use that knowledge to gain our own goals? We don't want to grow weeds in our garden. Like, we can talk more about weeds. Weeds are actually good for your garden because they're restoring the health of the soil. But obviously, you don't want to grow weeds. You can't really eat them, and they can be a bit of a tough one at some points. So I dedicated my life to understanding that, and that's actually the now my book is all about that, because when you understand how nature works, you can use that knowledge to become way more successful because you're working with nature rather than against it. And actually, when like a few other things happened in between where I am today, so I studied landscape architecture. I had a bachelor degree. I studied a master in Germany, got like the whole education, went into the 9 to 5 job in Germany. And after being in my 9 to 5 job, I became depressed because I was like, I love what I do about gardening and farming and all this stuff, but I'm stuck in a 9 to 5 in Germany, which I'm blessed that I've done it because it taught me a lot of how to do proper things. The Germans know how to do things properly and structured. So I'm blessed I learned that, but I was like, I'm not feeling fulfilled in that 9 to 5 job. So I said, okay, I quit my job, and I packed my backpack, had some savings, and I traveled the world to visit the most amazing projects around ecology, sustainable farms, eco resorts, people that were doing their own regenerative garden. I took permaculture courses. So I really dove deep into like, okay, we were facing this big problem with our planet, or this big challenge of like, okay, how can we keep living on this gorgeous planet and still produce sufficient food for everybody on this planet, healthy food mostly, because in a way we've already tackled the issues about like not having enough food on the planet. We have way too much food actually, even though there's still areas in the world that people are suffering from not having enough food, but that's often related to conflicts and climate, unfortunately, as well. But we have enough food. The quality of the food is just not good enough, and it's devastating our environment. So I dove deep into like what projects are out there, and that's also synthesized in my book. And then I lived in Saudi Arabia for about a year. I was working on projects on how to reforest the desert, like learning about the harshest climates and how we can even get successful there. then COVID hit, came back home, started my own business, and long story short, now I help people all across the world. I have clients in 4 continents, helping them to be more successful at gardening. So we do work where I coach people how to do it themselves. For other people, some of my clients are just too busy to do it themselves, and we come in and we do everything for them on the whole planning side. Just like an architect designs a building, we design the whole outdoor space. So that's in a nutshell where everything started.
Oh, so cool. I feel so fortunate to get to speak with you today, and I have so much admiration for your vision and your follow through. Also your courage to to get those blessings of adversity in terms of your training and being in an environment that was very challenging, and reporting that you benefited from the discipline, but it wasn't your lifelong calling to stay in that setting. And so then carrying that over, that's there's so much power in your message so far in terms of who and how you are in the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's often I try, and when I talk to people, I also coach some people in how to start their own business in regenerative ways. And I always try and go back with them to like the early memories of their, like as a child, what did you enjoy? What did you love doing? Because you have to pick something that you enjoy doing, because I'm so passionate about my work that it's not work for me. It's just
Yeah.
part of who I am and what I do. I
Yeah.
need to like even take care of my time, that I still get to sleep enough, because I just love it too much.
Well, let me share just a thing or two as we segue. So the person that connected us, Joe Rignola, that does the digital support for Health Accelerator and Seaworthy, which are respectively my digital presence in the functional medicine ether, and then my practice seeing patients here in Homer, Alaska. His sort of first iteration of work was the Human Longevity Project, traveling to the blue zone. So you share a lineage and an archetype similarity with him.
Nice.
And then he has this Grow Food documentary, which is on my list of things to buy over the holidays and watch with my family. And I just know from talking with Joe that I don't know if it's him or a character in the documentary that gets, who's I think living in New York, and they get fed up with not having access to good food. And so they convert their front lawn in an urban neighborhood, and then their neighbors get upset with the property values and the look and
Oh my God.
just so I kind of can't wait to see it, because one of the things I'm really fascinated by is the sort of urban gardening revolutions and what those do for people in the cities, where they get to connect to the earth and be innovative disruptors and health disruptors. And I don't want to wrench the conversation too far, but let's make this next plot twist around regenerative, because this is one of those words that resonates with people poetically and lyrically. They hear regenerative and they think, oh, I like the sound of that word. But this is super important, because people's craving to have access to whole food, in my experience, when they eat vegetables grown by themselves or somebody they know or somebody they trust or somebody local that are lovingly attended to, they get what I would characterize as this natural body high. There's something about eating a tomato you grew, or greens or carrot with a little dirt on it, so you're getting those beneficial organisms from the soil. And literally people say, wow, I didn't even know I could have this experience. But what you're talking about is that done in an elegant and sort of multi-dimensional fashion, they can do regenerative means they can do this in a way that's a win-win for themselves, the soil, their garden, their community, and for Mother Earth, because it regenerates the fertile capacity of themselves, their plate, their community, the planet, and carbon capture. Is that an accurate summary of regenerative?
Oh yeah, totally. You nailed it, Rob. I love how you broke it down. I think there's like even dissecting it, you could just take one of the reasons that resonates with you and go for that one and become a regenerative gardener. So let's say that you not even care about the environment. I think there's very few people who do, but even if you wouldn't, like there's still so much other benefits for you. And I think that's what we also have to focus on, to emphasize people on it, because I think we're getting in a paradigm shift where the word was sustainability. And it's good, it created awareness about, okay, we shouldn't harm the planet and all of that. But the problem with the word sustainability is it also feels like a burden. It's like, oh, now we have to be sustainable. It's going to cost us more. We have to tax carbon. We have to this, like, oh shit, our beautiful life is over. We have to be more respectful to the planet. So and even if you break down the literal meaning of sustainability, to sustain means kind of like status quo, to just stay the same. And we can't actually afford to sustain what we've been doing. We need to go the extra mile and regenerate. And once you start to think like, oh, sustainability feels already kind of difficult to achieve. Now we've had like the COP 25, they made some new agreements. Most countries are actually offended by the agreements. It's one of the first COPs where they actually got an agreement on climate change, but most of the developing countries are really offended by the deal. And this is what's still like in the age of sustainability. We're gonna make it a little bit less worse. That's what sustainability can be. Now, so logically you think, okay, let's go regeneratively, but that might be even harder, but it's not. It's actually way easier. Because once sustainability just looks at like the problems, whereas regeneratively or regeneration, like you mentioned, the benefits are endless. Just like you mentioned about the blue zones. I'm fascinated by the blue zones, by the way. So I love that you brought it up. And like the regeneration of your personal health, like health is a big topic, right? Like there's so much people suffering from modern day diseases. I don't have to explain it to you, but the cancers, the diabetes, like I just heard that in Texas, they just finished building a high-rise hospital only for children with cancer. So it's like it's growing increasingly. It's devastating to know that there's so many children that are harmed by how we've actually treated the planet, because I'm also a believer that whatever happens in our personal lives, like I remember going to an event and people would say, please, can somebody raise his hands who doesn't know anybody in their direct environment, like family, who isn't battling with some kind of a modern disease. Like there's nobody. You always know a cousin or a friend, or like it's so here. And then it brings us to the topic of how can we solve this. And as it turns out, when you become a regenerative gardener, like you mentioned, this the first thing is you get in the mental health benefits that are you're accomplishing something. It's like growing a baby. You're taking care of your garden. You have to look at it. You see it grow. It's like it's just only that is already amazing. Like the amazement of a plant that grows. In the morning, you have your morning coffee. You walk outside your garden and you see things happening. Like that, only that is already like would be a solid reason to become a gardener. But then, like what you mentioned about when you focus on the soil health, which is the key to become a regenerative gardener or farmer, is to fix the health of your soil, because our environment is poisoned with so much chemicals that before we had all those chemicals, nature would take care of itself. But now, because of the continuous pollution, we have to actively keep improving the health of the soil. And once your system goes, it's good, but you have to like find ways to do that, composting, all this stuff we can talk more about. But then as you fix your soil and you put your hands into the soil, the microorganisms get absorbed through your skin, and it's a direct impact on your gut health. And now they're also finding the brain health has a lot of microorganisms. So it's physically improving your health, but also mentally. I even think that a lot of the depressions that we have today are not only like what is a mental health issue. Yeah, it's kind of hard to physically grasp, but I do think that it has a lot to do with the pollution and the fact that we're not in contact with nature. So that's another great benefit. And we didn't even talk about what it does for the planet, that you're actually sequestering carbon dioxide from the atmosphere when you garden in such a way. Not even mentioning the value of your property will go up. Like they've shown, I've got some research that shows that neighborhoods where they've emphasis on creating not just gardens with a lawn and a tree, where they emphasis on creating something unique, the value is double of gardens that are, let's call them boring, with a lot of concrete and just lawn and trees. And by the way, lawn, if we could even talk about the lawn industry, which is like most of the lawns that we have, it's not to be played in. It's very poisoned, because the landscaping industry is so tied into the chemical companies that supply you with all the chemicals for keeping your lawn looking neat. So there's so much more cool stuff that you can do without all the chemicals. So yeah, I think it's endless when we talk about the benefits for people to do, or for the listeners here, when you start getting into it.
Awesome. One thing I've learned about the podcast now, around 5 years into it, is that the most valuable thing we can do that I know of is give people a look under the hood into thought leaders, the way they relate to the world, because our audience has access to your book, or they could work with you, or etc. And so I'm finding that the linchpin ideas are super important, but what often is more powerful, and maybe it's maybe the name of the podcast way back when, Field Notes and Exploration of Functional Medicine, was sort of prescient, in that it's an exploration of the way the thought leader themselves relates to the concepts. And I want to drill a little further into something super, super important that you shared, which is that the more beneficial path is actually easier, the regenerative path, if, including relating to it like a kid, with that fascination and curiosity and forward-leaning, loving relationship with what's in front of us. And the same thing happens in functional medicine. When people get an exercise prescription, it's the death knell of their exercise. They have to. Their inner rebel immediately starts scheming for how quickly and when they can torpedo the running shoes for the donuts, right? It's just an exercise prescription is a guarantee they won't exercise.
Oh yeah.
But if people are invited to think about how they felt as a kid on their bike or jumping into a swimming hole, then what happens is it's an invitation to say that movement isn't even the right word. The right word is play. When we move, we have that childlike, this feels good, I want to keep doing it. And so these are friendships with these practices. And the beautiful thing about our friendships is we automatically hang out more with our good friends and less with the people that didn't serve us as well. It essentially takes no energy at all.
Oh yeah.
It's a gravitational pull to the things that serve us best. So I think this is really good news today, because I think a lot of the thorniest problems may be solved as we realize, as countries, as people, as societies, we can do the easiest and the most beneficial thing. We can get pulled into the gravitational well of what matters most. And we can invite one another to do things that are good for everyone. These win-win solutions that are actually there. It's not a zero-sum game.
No, I agree. I think this is kind of also the concept of habit stacking, right? So now specifically looking into gardening, like you can stack a lot of things by spending even limited time, because there's also a big misconception. I'll explain more about the habit stack, but stacks. There's a big misconception about gardening. People think, and not everybody, it's changing, but some people think that when you garden, when you want your garden to look beautiful, abundant, that you get all the fruits and all this amazing stuff, you'll become a slave to your garden and you'll actually have to work more. And they think in the other direction, that if you want a low maintenance garden with little work, you should have a monoculture of lawn and trees. and it's actually wrong, because that will cost you, that lawn garden with just a tree, it might actually cost you more to maintain that. You have to mow it. There's so much more stuff. And where you do it regeneratively with all plant combinations and the whole science behind it, it can start taking care of itself. So just to give you an example, Rob, this year we finished a garden project for one of my clients. It's a 300 square meter garden, so it's a reasonable size. And my client wanted to have like the most biodiverse garden with fruits, vegetables, the whole thing. Like, and she loves birds and she wanted to have like the premium thing. And we challenged ourselves, okay, like how can we put all of that in? And she has a busy job. She's an entrepreneur. So we had to focus on creating solutions that were also low in maintenance. So we started to draft it. We put everything together, and I thought, okay, we can reduce the maintenance, but all the techniques that we used to improve the health of the soil, other low maintenance techniques that I also teach about in my masterclass, is the garden ended up taking 12 hours of maintenance in 9 months. So we finished it in springtime, and we're now getting into the cold season, so there won't be more maintenance. So probably even in 10, let's even 12, probably it'll end up being 12. That's a good tagline. 12 hours of maintenance in 12 months. That's 1 hour of maintenance in your garden a month. So, and then even when you do that 1 hour a month in your garden, it's a joy. You just like, you love doing it. So, and then to tie it back to like, okay, we need people to do more exercise, prescribe them exercise. They won't do it. Try and stack habits on it. Like, you can make it into a partner activity. You and your partner can do it. You and your kids and your family can do it. That's already one stack. You're working, you're producing your own healthy food. Your grocery bills will go down. You'll have a more beautiful garden to show to your friends and family when they come over. Like, you imagine you have a birthday party of your child, instead of looking at these, what I call empty backyards, ugly backyards with nothing there. It's a good space to have a party, but imagine having that in a abundant, beautiful, biodiverse space with birds and bees and everything. So that's a huge impact. So yeah, I think the garden offers a great way of creating holistic health for people who want to work in it.
Awesome. Well, the gardeners in my audience are going to get mad if I don't find out then what's an easier way to I have a guess where this is going, but how do they stay ahead of weeds? Or is it even staying ahead of weeds? Or is it just figuring out how the plants
love this
interrelate?
question. I love this question, Rob. Like, the weeds in some of my colleagues, I don't know if you know, yeah, you probably know Harry Potter. It's like saying the word Voldemort, weeds. You're not supposed to talk about it. It's like
the
nobody
plants that
dares
shall
to
not
talk
be
about it.
named.
Weeds, don't talk about weeds because it's a problem. But I'm telling you, weeds are a blessing. And it sounds weird because, and I'll break it down. So what are weeds? Weeds are actually annuals that are trying to restore the health of the soil. So if you're in your garden and you're like, let's call it a conventional gardener, what you'll often end up doing is turning around the soil. You see some weeds between the plants that you like, you'll scrape the surface to get rid of the weeds, or even completely till over the soil. And this gives a signal to nature, oh, the soil has been disturbed here. Nature says, okay, we're going to fix it. And the first plants we're going to send to fix it are the annuals that we call weeds, because they all have specific properties to restore the health of the soil. Like, one of them is, for example, daffodils. Do you have daffodils where you are? So no, it's not daffodils. It's the other yellow flower. Dandelions. Yeah, thank you for correcting me. So dandelions can be quite a bit of an issue in your garden when they start to spread themselves. And again, weeds are actually communicating to you what the problem of the soil is. And The dandelion is the best example for it. A dandelion has a very strong, deep tap root. So why is a dandelion showing up in your garden or in your lawn? You have a compacted soil. You have certain minerals that are lacking in your soil. Because what this taproot does, it can go up to 6 meters deep into the soil, and it'll find all the minerals that your soil actually needs to restore itself. And that's what the plant is here to do. And then on top of that, because your soil is compacted, with its taproots, it can decompact the soil. So now you can be like, okay, you can let nature take its course and do it for you, but this is going to take quite a long time. Like it might take several years before it has done the job. And in the meantime, you can't grow much because the weeds do overgrow your other plants. So you're like, okay, the weed actually wants to restore the health of the soil. It wants to we have a compaction issue and some minerals are lacking. Okay, how can we fix it? Well, decompact the soil. There's a special tool, and when people follow my training, we're going to talk about it at the end of the interview. I have a free training, and I'm talking about that tool. There's a tool that you can decompact the soil without turning it around, because you might think like, okay, decompact it, let's turn it around, and it will be decompacted. Yes, for a short time, but you're actually making the problem worse, and you'll have more weeds. So you need a specific tool that just decompacts the soil, and then add you don't need huge amounts, like 1 or 2 centimeters. You have to help me out there in inches, but it's very little. Let's say it's less than a thumb high of quality compost, which is full of the minerals and the nutrients that you need and the microbiology. You'll fix that issue with the weeds. And then on top of that, what people forget is like when you plant a new garden or you're maintaining it, or when you're growing vegetables, you'll have spaces between the plants, and you don't want the soil to be naked. Because look at in nature, where do you see bare soil? It hardly ever happens. Only when there's a landslide or when there's a big fire. The nature is always keeping the soil covered, because as it turns out, the top layer of our soil is like the skin of our planet. So if you scrape it open each and every time, it's not good. You can have an infestation of diseases just like your skin. You need to cover it. You need to take care of your own skin. And it's the same with the soil. So what other technique you can apply is then, once you've sorted out the weeds and you remove them, and actually when you remove them, you should keep them, you pull them out, or actually we use a special knife. There's a Japanese knife where you cut it off so you don't destroy the soil again. And then you have to keep it on top of the soil. And then we add specific mulches. So mulching is one of the huge topics in regenerative gardening. So you cover the soil with mulch, problem solved. You won't have any weeds, or at least for a certain time, you won't have weeds. And even if weeds come, you cut them out with that special knife, and you just place them on top of your mulch, because these weeds come and they actually want to give minerals to the soil. So that's the whole thing about weeds, and how nature is actually, when you have weeds, you should bless them, because they're trying to restore the health of your soil.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome.
So as it turns out, Voldemort is actually a good guy.
That's beautiful. Okay, let's talk about the tiers of resources. So you've got your book there. Can we see the cover of your book?
Yes, here it is. 12 Universal Laws of Nature, how to get the most potential out of your land. It already received an award, so I'm very excited about that. And I have Raymond Aaron, who's a New York Times best-selling author, who wrote my foreword. So it's very exciting to see how everything is evolving. It means there's a high demand for people that want to learn. So my book is really about, okay, how does nature work on a universal level? And what does that mean for nature? And what does that mean for you as a gardener? And how can you use that to become more successful? And I run through all kinds of practical things you can do.
Excellent. And if people want to do a master class with you, how would they connect to that?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So Rob, so when people are like, "Oh, I might be interested," I would say they can go and check out my 30-minute free training, which kind of gives you like an idea of how I teach. I told you about that special tool that people should check. It's in that free training, and this is like a taster when you go to the supermarket. You can try
Yeah.
out some things, right? And it
Yeah.
gives you a good idea and some things that you can apply immediately in your garden. And then when there's people that feel like, okay, I'm really down, I want to start learning, I have no clue how to do it, I'm confused, I'm even like overwhelmed with the knowledge there is, I will even open my calendar for them. So there's a system called Calendly. People can actually go into my calendar, and I'm happy to give that to your audience, and they can book a 30-minute training, free training with me, and we can run through what they're struggling with their garden and how they can get started to take it to the next level.
Yes, let's absolutely put that in the show notes. And then Joe, who I had mentioned at the beginning, will he'll use his superpowers to get that done. So in the show notes for the YouTube channel and the podcast audio only platform, people can click on that in there. And should they access your services or learn more about you through a website or more through the book and the Calendly? How should people find you?
So I can give you the Calendly link. It's calendly.com/garden of your dreams. I think we can put that in the show notes. And my free training you can access through my amazing website. I'm so proud that we have the URL. It's called www.gardenofyourdreams.com, gardenofyourdreams.com. And there
Awesome.
you put in some things and you'll get to the free training from there. And then you can find my book. It's now on Amazon. You can also go onto my book website, find out some more resources about the book. And the book website is 12lawsofnature.com. Also excited that I got that URL.
Yes, score. And then at the beginning, did you invoke that you also work with larger entities? Do you have a team beyond yourself that works with businesses and, I don't know, corporations, independent political entities, communities? I mean, what's the scale
Oh yeah,
of
that's a
what you
great
do?
question. We mostly talked about how people can, how I support them in the DIY space. So when they want to do it themselves, I also support people that don't necessarily have the time to learn it themselves. So we come in and we do everything for them. We have a lot of private clients for like property redesigns. We come in and we redesign it. I'm working with developers. Like I'm just finishing up a project at the moment. It's quite exciting. A big rooftop garden on top of an office building. So that's the kind of work that we also do. I'm working with farmers across the world as well. So if there's farmers, please reach out. And yeah, I think that's about it. I might forget something, but yeah, I think it's all about like harnessing the power of nature, and then you can apply it everywhere in your garden, in you as a real estate developer, yeah, as a farmer, because the laws apply to everything that's outdoors and actually indoors as well.
Well, you totally lit me up today, and I'm sure you're going to really light up and bring a lot of hope to the audience.
Yeah, I agree. It's super exciting to share all the excitement with you, because your work is equally important to get people to understand about holistic health. That's part of the equation, to know like, okay, if you're in have some health issues, what's the root cause of it? Where is it? Is it in my lifestyle? Maybe it's pollution, maybe there's other family related things, and how can I get ahead of myself and improve my life in whatever shape, form, or thing you want to do. Because
Yeah.
you only need small things, like I said with the radishes. When you're like, go to the next store where you can buy seeds and get some radishes, put them in a small container. You'll be amazed how fast you can eat your own food. And then and when you do it consistently, step by step, every day, you can create your own garden of your dreams. So it's very exciting.
Oh, hey, what's the documentary you're part of?
Oh
What's the name of
yes,
that?
thank you for mentioning that. I was gonna get to that. So I'm also featured in a movie. It's called The Cure, an Inside Job, which is all about global healing. And there's nine healthcare practitioners. And I told you, Rob, I'm a bit the odd fish in that pond because I'm not necessarily a health practitioner, but I do impact it a lot. So in the documentary movie, I'm talking about regenerative farming, the experiences on our family farm as we're transitioning it away from the chemicals, and also, yeah, my personal journey in supporting people to become regenerative gardeners, or at least have a regenerative garden for themselves. Because even if you don't want to be active, like engaged in being a gardener, maybe it's not for everybody. Still, you want to be surrounded in a beautiful, biodiverse environment that kind of maintains itself, right?
Yeah, there's so many different ways that people can plug into this that are intuitive and nourishing and conscious and unconscious and subconscious. And so I think it's no surprise that the father of functional medicine, Jeff Bland, in his current iteration in Big Bold Health, has a big focus on regenerative agriculture and uh, Himalayan tartary buckwheat and how it helps the immune system. And
Oh yeah.
so this is a lot of the best ideas, most important things that are happening
Mm-hmm.
are co-emergent manifestations of related ideas in multiple domains. That's a sign
Oh
of,
yeah, totally.
of just like plants, right? A bunch of these things are cropping up everywhere, and we keep seeing and
Yes.
hearing about them over and over again because I think they're sort of coming from the unconscious into our consciousness, and maybe a little bit on a mystical level. I think we're sort of connecting to what we need to be doing in our
Oh
connection
yeah.
to the earth at this time.
Totally. Yeah, you're so right, because that's like where when once I started to realize what all the benefits are, and how they're all interconnected, it's like, wow, why wouldn't you do it, right? And then I'm also very excited for America, by the way. We're heading into the end of 2024. The elections have just come up. I don't want to talk about politics, but I'm very excited about who Trump is getting on board, because he's getting one regenerative farmer called Joel Salatin, who's done an amazing job throughout his life. He's had to like fight, well, not fight. He had a lot of, let's call it, he had to climb against a lot of the stream, and it seems to be turning now because together with Kennedy, he's going to be helping to transform agriculture. So I'm actually very excited about that. My brother shared the stage with him in Amsterdam on a farm event. So and I'm gonna get him on my podcast. Yeah, we didn't even talk about my podcast. That could be cool as well. If people want to know more about regeneration on the practical side, they can go and listen to my podcast as well.
Well, please, when in the show notes, when you coordinate with Joe, who tees this all up and formats it for the digital space, all of the different ways that people can connect with you. That's part of, because what we're trying to do with the podcast is service. This is a service-driven way of relating to the topic, and then the folks on the podcast almost invariably have things that people can connect to as resources. But a lot of people just listen to the podcast and learn,
Mm-hmm.
and another function of the podcast is just that anytime we bring light and bring things into the light, people feel more hopeful and less heavy. And so, because I'm in a remote part of the world, when I get to spend time like this with you, I get to be with my tribe. And so then
Mm-hmm.
I feel more hopeful and less heavy. And I know that's happening for my audience too. So put all the resources in there in your podcast, and people will just have one more precious, trustworthy person they can connect with in many ways.
Yeah, Rob, it's amazing what you do for the world and spreading the word and yeah, being connected globally. It's such a powerful tool, podcasting
Mm, mm.
and what you do.
Well, thanks a million. Have a great rest of your day. Maybe is it evening for you?
It's getting into the evening here, yeah.
Well, it was extra kind of you to give us your time in the evening, and I look forward to connecting again.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Rob. Thank you for having me on. I hope to do this again some other time.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for the Seaworthy podcast. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. If you think we've earned it, please consider giving this podcast a like, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. Thanks.